Hello and welcome. Nepal's sudden ban on major social media platforms jolted the country into its largest anti-government demonstrations in years. The public rationale was regulatory non-compliance. Global tech firms allegedly failed to register locally or respect Nepal's rules. Yet what followed went far beyond a routine enforcement step. Thousands of mostly young protesters converged on central Kathmandu. Clashes with police ensued, curfews were imposed, and reports of deaths and hundreds of injuries spread. The spark was the ban. The actual fire was years of frustration over limited jobs, persistent corruption, and a stagnant political class. Viewed through another increasingly influential perspective, the unrest did not arise from domestic grievances alone. This perception posits that external actors, foreign governments, transnational NGOs, philanthropic foundations, digital platforms, and regional power brokers shaped the timing, scale, and trajectory of events. In this reading, Nepal's crisis fits a tiresomely familiar playbook. Leverage real discontent, weaponize information ecosystems, channel funding and logistics through civil society networks, elevate charismatic figures and turn a policy dispute into a crisis of legitimacy. While not dismissing genuine local grievances, this lens centres outside influence as the major accelerant. Blocking Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, X, LinkedIn, Snapchat and other platforms severed the daily lifelines of Nepal's digitally native population. For students and young workers, social media is not merely entertainment, it's identity, information, organising, and opportunity. Abrupt bans invariably backfire, especially when institutional trust is low. But even as the ban catalysed outrage, the speed and coordination of the mobilisation raised immediate suspicion. Did Nepal's domestic fury find its shape and much of its force through external agency? Analysts tracing global protests waves from Serbia's bulldozer revolution to Georgia's Rose Revolution, Ukraine's Orange Revolution, Euromaidan, the Arab Spring, Hong Kong's mobilisation, Sri Lanka's 2022 upheavals, and student-driven movements in Bangladesh and elsewhere, collectively show recurring patterns. Narrative priming, years of messaging that reframes entrenched problems, corruption, elite capture, economic stagnation into a rallying identity with simple, potent slogans. Organisational training, workshops and toolkits spread through NGOs, foundations and online networks that teach non-violent tactics, protest logistics and media framing, and digital security. Funding channels, a mix of local donations and international grants, underwriting communications, transport, legal aid, medical support, and rapid response media. Influencer amplification, coordinated promotion of specific leaders and groups, often tied to awards, fellowships, and international media spotlights. Algorithm-driven virality rewards moral outrage and binary narratives while eclipsing nuance and inflaming polarization. In Nepal, these elements appeared in compressed form. Civic groups with reputations forged in disaster relief and civic service help seed and amplify calls to mobilise. Donor names, business figures and philanthropists circulated online with documentation in some cases and conjecture in others. For critics, the conversion looked less like spontaneous combustion and more like slick choreography. Supporters counter that such accusations diminish the agency of Nepali youth and smear legitimate civil society work. They argue the movement's energy is rooted in real hardship, underemployment, migration pressures, and disillusionment with political dynasties, and that external grants are standard in development ecosystems. Both points can be true. Outside resources can professionalise and scale activism. They can also align agendas with donors and tilt outcomes. Mobilising at national scale is expensive. Coordinated messaging, transportation, first aid, legal support for detainees, and real-time communications require big money and extensive management. This is where suspicions harden. When an anti-elite movement appears to benefit from elite patrons, when corporate backers surface alongside anti-corruption slogans, when award circuits and philanthropic spotlights elevate particular organisers. None of this automatically invalidates a movement, yet in an anti-corruption frame, any whiff of opaque funding or conflicted sponsorship becomes combustible. The constructive test is transparency. Who funds what, on what terms, and with what disclosures? Which organisations set priorities and how are leaders chosen? In countries where regulatory frameworks are weak and accusations fly easily, voluntary disclosures by both government and civil society can build confidence, though they rarely satisfy everyone. In fast-moving crises, claims outpace verification. Social feeds filled with dramatic accounts of assaults on political figures, arson targeting institutions, and mob violence. Some allegations may be true, others remain unverified or disputed. What is certain is that the optics of disorder, especially when stitched into short clips and incendiary captions, reshape the moral terrain. A state response that includes water cannons, tear gas, and reports of live fire sharpens the frame from regulatory enforcement to state repression. Labelling dynamics also matter. International media shortcuts, calling events Gen Z protests, for instance, can sanitise or glamorise complex realities. Critics argue that celebrity branding can inadvertently legitimise violence. Activists see the label as recognition of a generational voice long ignored. The battle over words becomes a battle over legitimacy. Nepal sits between India and China, with the United States and Europe watching closely. That geography ensures that domestic unrest is interpreted through a geopolitical lens. The United States is suspected of favouring leadership less aligned with Beijing, whether through overt diplomacy or democracy promotion ecosystems. Washington presents its stance as support for stability, transparency, and rights. China prioritises border stability and is wary of mass movements that might inspire copycats. Beijing favours predictability and order and views civic uprisings as externally stoked. India's interests are deep and multifaceted. economic integration, migration, culture and security. New Delhi prizes continuity in Kathmandu and often reads unrest as regional risk with domestic implications. The result is narrative competition. Each capital filters Nepal's unrest through its own anxieties and interests, and each set of suspicions finds ready audiences online. Personal choices, a younger ambassador here, a combined regional post there, get overinterpreted as strategic signalling. The risk is that Nepalese lived concerns, jobs, dignity, fairness, get subsumed by great power storylines. A growing strand of commentary casts Nepal's crisis as a chapter in a broader deep state strategy. Surround India with pliant regimes, constrain China's regional influence, and use diversion, deception, and division to manage outcomes. This view connects events across South Asia, from Colombo to Dhaka and to Islamabad, into a single playbook. It's a compelling narrative because it simplifies complexity and explains coincidence. It also risks flattening local agency, ignoring policy missteps, and turning every civic actor into a presumed proxy. As with most grand explanation, parts can be true without the whole being determinative. External influence is often real. It is not always omnipotent. Whatever the organising story, lethal confrontations and attacks on institutions, parliament, courts, party offices, private residences, inflict lasting damage. Allegations of lynch mob behaviour, assaults on public figures, and arson undermine the moral claim of any movement and feed demands for harsh crackdowns. Conversely, abusive policing and excessive force by the state delegitimise authority and radicalise the street. Even those who emphasise foreign influence concede that the soil was fertile. Jobless youth and underemployment drive migration. Closed political networks and corruption corrode confidence, and a sense of cyclical stagnation strangles hope. Social media became the lever to expose graft and coordinate action. The ban removed that lever, forcing a volatile energy flashpoint into the streets. The key question is causal weight. A purely domestic reading sees organic mobilisation mismanaged by a heavy-handed state. An external influence reading sees an organic spark ignited by a prepared net, funding, training, and narrative machinery that scaled outrage swiftly and steered it towards maximalist confrontation. Both perspectives illuminate parts of the truth. The latter insists that without the outside scaffolding, the crisis would have crested lower and de-escalated faster. The grievances are real. Jobs, dignity and fairness are not manufactured talking points. The ban was catalytic. Sweeping blocks on dominant platforms tend to radicalise, especially among the young. Force escalates crises. Reports of deaths and widespread injuries, however counted, shift the moral equation and international attention. Information is contested. Specific allegations about donors, organisers and orchestrators range from documented to unverified and must be treated with caution. Outside powers will try to shape outcomes. Nepalese will live with the results. The two narratives collide. One casts a grassroots youth movement confronting corruption and an out-of-touch political class, inflamed by a government that silenced digital spaces and responded with force. The other highlights external choreography, a well-worn playbook of narrative priming, funding streams, training pipelines, and influencer amplification that drives legitimate anger towards outcomes aligned with outside agendas. Neither narrative alone suffices. Together, they explain both the scale and volatility of Nepal's unrest. But if one must be emphasised to understand why the crisis escalated so quickly, the external influence lens offers the sharper account of acceleration and direction. Further to this, Kathmandu's iconic Hilton Hotel was tragically reduced to a smouldering ruin. The destruction of Nepal's tallest hotel, which opened just 14 months ago as a symbol of post-earthquake progress and international luxury, marked a dramatic escalation. The burning down of Kathmandu's Hilton Hotel required a concerted effort and precise planning. This action is beyond the organisational capacity and means of disorganised mob outrage. Aside from this, what's undeniable is the courage and frustration of young Nepalis who believe their country can do better, and the obligation of Nepal's institution to earn back trust by protecting rights, delivering services, and demonstrating that public office is a public trust, not a family inheritance. Outside powers will have preferences, rumours will proliferate, posts will go viral. The surest way to deny external actors the leverage they seek is to reduce the fuel they exploit: impunity, exclusion, and economic stagnation. Call it a Gen Z uprising, a colour revolution remix, or a complex power struggle shaped by foreign interference. The moment is consequential because it exposed a widening gap between a digitally native citizenry and an analogue political order. It also established how quickly unidentified outside networks can amplify a domestic spark into a full-blown legitimacy crisis. A glance in the rearview mirror confirms this MO as the norm and not the exception. And it's a safe bet that whatever authority takes power will most likely be worse than its predecessor. Thank you for watching.